Record.
Hello, I'm science fiction, fantasy, horror, and middle grade author Adam Troy Castro with another edition of Social Distancing Story Hour. And this story, Night of the Living POTUS, was published for the first time a bunch of years ago and has since become an ebook and is also available online as another professionally read broadcast. I am not a professional.
Broadcast?
Yes, a prodcast. A podcast. I am not a professional reader, therefore I stumble and I do all sorts of things. And I also have a cat here that is going to interfere. But we are reading this today on a day with lightning and thunder, and we are hoping that this adds some atmosphere to the proceedings. Ladies and gentlemen, Night of the Living POTUS. All presidents have the same lesson to learn, and they all learn it early in the first full morning of their respective administrations. At that point, they have already taken their oaths, already declared their principles to the nation, already enjoyed the first round of celebrations, already settled in to what they imagine will be an administration marked by great words and heroic deeds. They are all ready for the lesson that will haunt them throughout the remainder of their days in power, giving them the somber gravity that so many people mistakenly attribute to the unimaginable pressures of the job. Nobody knows that this change in them has almost nothing to do with anything they face as chief executive, and everything to do with the ordeal they all survive after their first night sleeping under the White House roof. It will be the same for the next new president, male or female, young or old, Republican or Democrat, warrior or pacifist, idealist or tool of his corrupt corporate backers. For the sake of argument, we posit a man. He's young, robust, charismatic, learned, well, that leaves out the new guy, driven by his vision for a new agenda. He has not been sleeping long. He was kept busy last night by the half-dozen inaugural balls where he and the First Lady had been expected to make their joint appearance. But the need for at least a couple of hours of sleep prior to the onset of his responsibilities drove him and his wife to the presidential bed, even as the last of those formals still raged at a hotel across town. He does not dream of his busy next day's itinerary, of all the terrible mistakes that can torpedo his place in history, or even of standing before a press conference of thousands, naked but for that mouthy bitch from the New York Times, clad in dominatrix gear as she warns, "Now remember, you asked for this." For this night, at least, he has accomplished all his waking dreams and has no room for sleeping ones. Exhausted, he is all but comatose and incapable of noticing when the Secret Service enters to sedate the First Lady and quietly hustle her from the residence. He does not know, because he has not yet been told, that this happens before dawn on the first morning of every new president's administration, and that the operatives who just removed his wife are the very same ones who performed this service for the 5 most recent administrations. They may be elderly by now, but by God, they're efficient. The new president doesn't wake until some dim impulse of his reptilian brain alerts him to a dark silhouette looming over him. He opens his eyes, registers the metallic glint of the hatchet beginning its murderous descent, and rolls away just as the pillow behind him erupts in a mushroom cloud of liberated feathers. Cursing, not yet understanding why these pre-dawn hours have become an arena for mortal combat, the new president scrambles away, tumbles off the opposite end of the bed, somehow finds the light switch, and rises to his knees just in time to see his assailant circle the foot of the bed. His eyes, recently touted in National Review as firm and unwavering, register the familiar iconic face of the enemy. One all too familiar from the dollar bill, from textbooks, and from commercials for President's Day sales. distorted now by the kind of murderous bloodlust that has never been depicted on paintings of this historic figure crossing the Delaware. This is not an impostor, not an actor, not a crazed assassin with a founding father fetish. A founding father fetish. Sorry about that. This is the real George Washington, miraculously returned to life, but in a murderous frenzy. He's wearing a blue waistcoat and white leggings and an expression of undying hatred, and that is all the new president has time to register before he has to scuttle across the floor in his pajamas, screaming for the Secret Service. The Secret Service does not answer his cries for help. When it comes to this important part of every president's first day, they never do. But they do watch in their monitors, and they do nod with approval as the new president uses a lamp snatched off the nightstand to block the next slash from Washington's hatchet. They observe the resourcefulness with which the new president parries another slash, still screaming for the help that they are duty-bound to withhold. They admire this president for rising to the challenge right away in a manner that so many others have not. That big bully of a Texan, for instance, the one so talented at picking up little dogs by the ears, had whimpered like a girl at this point. The peanut farmer had soiled himself. W had misunderstood the situation completely, imagining himself under attack by the man in the oatmeal box. But the new president is a genuine profile in courage. He stands his ground and he parries another attack, and though the next hammering blow almost knocks him over, he not only manages to regain his fair and balanced position, but also presses his advantage, driving the lamp into Washington's forehead with a crunch loud enough to be heard in Baltimore. Washington drops the hatchet, staggers backward, and collapses onto the new president's bed, thus adding it to the long list of places where he slept. Heart pounding, the new president staggers over to the bed and stares down at the remains of a face he knows as well as his own. He touches the attacker's cheek with an index finger, expecting to find a mask of some kind, a la Scooby-Doo. But no, it's flesh all right. Once again, he tries to persuade himself that this is just an assassin who merely happens to look like George Washington. But the vivid reality of the moment argues against that interpretation. This is George Washington. That's when he notices that the First Lady is missing. He is not a romantic man, this new president. He does not love his wife in any goopily adolescent manner, and at this moment cannot recall the last time he told her he loved her. But he has grown used to her presence, and he does count on her guidance in this rarefied enterprise their shared lives have now become. The prospect of her trapped somewhere in this legendary house, fighting for her life against, perhaps, a murderous Martha Washington, fills him with the kind of dread no threat to his own life can muster. He cries out her name and races to the door, which is of course sealed and will not be opened for him, no matter how furiously he demands to know the meaning of all this. Watching the scene play out on monitors with the senior members of the Secret Service, the new president's chief of staff thinks about his own hidden passion for horror movies and the rule, well known to enthusiasts, that anyone pounding on a door and demanding to be let out is immediately attacked from behind. He watches the shadowy figure as it comes into frame behind the new president and finds himself murmuring, "Turn around, turn around." The new president, sensing something wrong, whirls to confront the not only obnoxious and disliked, but now thoroughly deranged face of President John Adams. The new president is not as fanatical a historian as some of his predecessors, but he has seen the portraits. He recognizes who he's facing. Shock paralyzes him until he feels the fingers close on his neck, his air supply already cut off. He braces himself against the locked door and propels himself forward, driving Adams into a 200-year-old cabinet. Adams does not waver. The man who brought the American Revolution into being by sheer force of personality is not to be deterred by a little bruising. The new president feels his world grow black at the edges, but drives Adams into the dresser a second time and a third. They spin again and hit the floor in a tangle of thrashing chief executive limbs. Still, Adams does not weaken. The new president flails about for a weapon, finds a shard of broken crystal, drives the point into his assailant's eye, and the rest, to coin a phrase, is history. Even as he collapses against the bureau, massaging the throat now marked by an angry red line, a new wariness shines in the new president's eyes. He achieved his station in life by knowing how to anticipate trends. He can prognosticate the further course of this morning very easily, without any recourse to pollsters or focus groups or even to paid special counsel. He knows who's coming next. And here, indeed, comes Thomas Jefferson, the architect of Monticello, the composer of the Declaration of Independence and the impregnator of Sally Hemings, perhaps the most articulate man ever to hold the venerable title of president, now reduced to a guttural howl as he advances on the current office holder, wielding his quill pen like a stiletto. Jefferson is a product of the age of reason, and the new president tries to reason with him in kind, certain that these hostilities can be avoided by a few rounds of calm and measured negotiation. But Jefferson's advance is as resolute as his prose was pellucid, and he doesn't even slow as he jabs the implement at the new president's heart. The new president retreats to his right, as so many presidents are apt to, yowling as the quill rips a gash in his upper bicep. Retreating, also in the manner of so many new presidents before him, he backs against the wall and finds himself whimpering at the implement that forged nations, makes fresh edits to his shoulders, forearms, and cheek. Only when Jefferson draws back, with a flourish only possible for one so accomplished at penmanship, does the new president finally react to the clear and present danger and counterattack with a body slam that drives the pride of Virginia back, halfway across the room and back into the bed. Jefferson howls. The new president rips the quill from his great man's hand and drives it screaming into the great man's neck. But that is not the end of it either. The next few hours continue in precisely this vein. All but a few of the invaders, in accordance with their respective marks on history, as unmemorable as assailants as they were as presidents. Indeed, the new president experiences more than a little difficulty just identifying some of these figures by sight. Only a few stand out from the pack, and they're not always the most physically dangerous. Andrew Jackson, carrying so many bullets in his body from his vengeful and dual-besotted life that he rattles like a bag of marbles, takes 20 blows on the head before finally succumbing. William Henry Harrison advances only halfway across the bedroom before wheezing, coughing, and then falling flat on his face dead. James Buchanan is not much of a fighter. Abraham Lincoln, who split rails as a youth, is a deadly combatant, his woodman's axe extending the already prodigious reach of his over-length arms. Grover Cleveland, the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, follows the paradigm set down by most cinematic mad slashers by rising from the statement-strewn floor, not dead after all, following the brief and ineffective interregnum of an assault by Benjamin Harrison. By the time the assailants begin to include figures from the 20th century, the new president is gasping, his pajamas in tatters, his skin marred by a dozen serious injuries. He needs all the strength his exhausted body can muster, because these newcomers are among the most dangerous. Sportsman, soldier, and avid hunter Theodore Roosevelt is almost impossible to defeat. The new president shatters almost every valuable antique in the room just to take him down, and even then needs to reduce his own fingers to hamburger, just prying the man's jaws from his ankle. The obese William Howard Taft, though slow-moving and slow of breath, is almost as formidable, in part because he almost crushes the new president to death with the weight of his own body, in part because the new president, now wielding the sword of Ulysses S. Grant, inflicts 6 or 7 gaping wounds without once penetrating deep enough to nick any of the man's cushioned vital organs. That battle doesn't end until the new president musters the last of his fading strength to force the fat man into the bathtub, which Taft has historically been unable to escape. Wedged in tight, rippling with enraged avoirdupois, Taft can only grope with hands like sausages as the new president fills the tub with water and fries the bastard with a casual toss of the First Lady's hairdryer. Standing over his mangled body, the new president feels certain that he's just dispatched the deadliest of the creatures he'll have to face before the likes of Kennedy and Nixon. But he's wrong. No. The worst foe yet, the most deceptively powerful, turns out to be Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who emerges crawling out from under the bed, his withered and useless legs not nearly as decisive a factor as the compensating overdeveloped musculature of his arms, almost falling to the man's first attack due to overconfidence. When he cannot escape Roosevelt's powerful grip, the new president squirms free, regains his feet, and enjoys a few relatively easy minutes just strolling out of the New Dealer's way. He puts off the inevitable longer than he truly has to, because taking on Roosevelt, the very symbol of strength over adversity, feels dirtier than anything he's had to do so far. But there comes a moment when even the greatest president, even this president must realize that he's used up every peaceful initiative. He shakes his head sadly and goes to the closet to get his golf clubs. After that, things get easier. The new president has it down to a science now, and as he wades like a titan through a bedroom increasingly littered with bodies, he resists a total descent into hysteria by constantly reminding himself that history itself limits the number of attackers still remaining. Taking out Kennedy means gaining the height advantage and striking him from behind. Johnson resigns midway through the fight. Nixon is a squirmy, shifty-eyed bastard, a lot like a rabid ferret. He inflicts a number of savage, ravenous bites on the new president's leg before going down from a ceremonial plate to the skull. The new president, feeling giddy by now, shouts, "Normalize relations with this China, you asshole!" Ford has the body of a fullback, but keeps tripping over his own 2 feet. Carter's attack seems perfunctory, despite the bloodlust in his heart. Reagan has the martial arts moves of a man who pretends toughness, but in truth learned all he knows from the movies. Bush the elder attempts the same moves as Reagan, but can't fake the conviction. Bush the younger, clad not in the jacket and tie favored by so many of the others, but in a flight suit with a suspicious bulge in the crotch, steps back after landing a couple of early blows, smirks in imagined victory even as he declares the fight over, and doesn't even seem to notice as the new president puts him down like a dog. Obama is precise and organized, but goes down to repeated merciless jabs from the right. Trump is relentless with the low blows, but is unable to take even the slightest punishment. Even bloody and staggering, he insists that he's the best fighter of all time. When he loses, he says it's fake. But that's it now. It's over. Appropriately enough, this is more or less simultaneous with the arrival of dawn. The new president, or what's left of him, stands bloody but unbowed among the unmoving stuff of stamps and monuments, free for the first time to wonder what this has all been about, knowing in his heart that he's just been made privy to some kind of elemental truth, were he only to find sufficient wisdom to discern it. He feels stronger for the experience somehow, but for some reason he also feels like weeping, his optimism, his dreams of great accomplishments, all fading beneath the certain knowledge that his plan for a better future will be as flawed as all the others. And somewhere between the time the First Lady arrives to see what's become of her husband, and the time the first aid crew arrives to patch his wounds, and by the time his valet arrives to pick out his suit and make him presentable, And the time the chief of staff arrives to assure him that none of what's happened here will impact his appointment schedule. And the time when he can finally stride forth to help guide the destiny of this great nation. The new president finally reaches the epiphany he's been looking for. This truth is marching on. Someday it will be a successor. And another successor after that. And another successor after that. And none will ever know a lasting peace for as long as America endures. Since all will be pulled from retirement or the grave to appear in this room on the first day of every new administration to participate in this one savage rite of passage. Because there's only one reason why every new president would have to spend their first day in office weathering the hostility of all the presidents who came before. Because they'll spend the rest of their respective administrations earning it. Looking gray and eminent now in a way he never has before, the new president leaves the most important battlefield and heads toward the Oval Office, his footsteps echoing behind him. Not at all. The end. That was Night of the Living POTUS. Thank you very much, and stay safe.